Morning, y'all. Today we'll be talking about Mesopotamia. Oh, coffee. Oh, shoot, that always tricks me. Anyways, yeah, Mesopotamia is an ancient river civilization. Arguably the first civilization. They were the first guys to invent writing and stuff. So, with no further ado, we will get started on Mesopotamia. By the way, a lot of you guys are doing really good. Keep up the good work. I appreciate all the hard work you're doing. It's a sad day today. Hockey's over. The Dallas Stars lost last night. I'm glad Tampa Bay won the Stanley Cup. However, there's no more hockey to watch for an indefinite period of time. So, press F for respects. Sad day. Oh, whoops. I forgot to share my screen. So, anyways, let's get started. Let's get this over with. Let me get my laser pointer out. Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent. So, Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, is a valley between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, these two rivers. They are located in modern-day Iraq, mostly, somewhat in Kuwait, and just let's do a Google Earth. Launch it. Launch the Earth. This is kind of a fun little thing I like to do when I'm looking up stuff. We'll do some Google Earth stuff later on as well. I'm working on getting it to work on these computers pretty simply. So, if we were looking for modern day Iraq, as many of you should and I hopefully know, modern day Iraq is in the Middle East. That would be this part of the world. So, let's get a closer look. We've got Iraq right here. We don't want that. Maybe we could even search. Tigris, a river in Asia. So here we are, the Tigris. Let's zoom in even anymore. So we have the Tigris River here. And the Euphrates River. These two rivers looked much different in the ancient days, as you can imagine. The time we're studying is 2,000 years to 3,000 years before Christ, so that would be roughly 5,000 years ago. So the two rivers split here. So this is what we're talking about. The Fertile Crescent, these two river valleys. The space in between them is the space that we'll be studying mostly as we do this unit. So now that we have an idea where we're working, let's get an idea of what we're working with. So the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers in Iraq, modern day Iraq, not previous day Iraq. Excuse me, I'm drinking my coffee. These rivers often overflow and leave silt behind. The rainy season comes and a lot of rain runs through them, and they grow rapidly in size. That all that flowing water from all the rain brings in debris from the surrounding nature, the surrounding countryside, essentially, and then that leaves silt. The silt is really rich in nutrients, and it is perfect for growing crops, much better than the surrounding area of Iraq, which is pretty dry and arid. And the soils there don't support a lot of life because they don't have much nutrients in them. But these river valleys, they allow for a lot of nutrients to exist in them, and then a lot of plants can grow from those nutrients. So almost all the ancient civilizations existed around rivers that we know of. The Sumerians, they developed the first Mesopotamian civilization. The Sumerians were the first people to write, we believe. Records indicate. So surplus food. So you guys are going to have a question that is, why was the first Fertile Crescent good for supporting life? It was because the two rivers overflowed and would leave silt, which you can grow agriculture on. So that'll be the first answer. Surplus food grown in the Fertile Crescent created conditions for greater specialization of labor. Basically, because people had so much food, you didn't need everyone to become a farmer. You could have people be priests, administrators, warriors, slaves, builders, people who basically just didn't produce food for a living. So it allowed for more jobs to exist. Ancient Mesopotamia. It covered 3 general areas. These are ancient areas, so you won't hear them mentioned anymore. Assyria, which eventually became a powerful empire, the Assyrian Empire. The Akkad, which became the Akkadian Empire, and the city of Akkad. And then there is the city of Sumer, which was the Sumerian Empire. Several different ethnicities lived in these areas. They were not one ethnicity. Some of them were Semitic, basically what we would consider Hebrew people today. They spoke Hebrew, just like Jewish people. Jewish people speak Hebrew. And then there was also Persians, what we would consider modern day Iranians, and Iraqis. So a nice mix of, I don't know what you would have called ancient day Iraqis, but they're different culture. Sumerians developed the first Mesopotamian civilization, and it involved many peoples. There were a lot of different areas. So Sumer, here's those 2 rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. So the Tigris, Euphrates, you can see them labeled. There's Babylon, which you guys might have heard of. Damascus, which is still a city. Jerusalem, many of you I'm sure know Jerusalem. Nineveh, some ancient cities that are pretty popular in the Bible and such. By 3000 BCE, so that'd be 5,000 years ago, the Sumerians had formed a number of city-states. We studied that very first city last lesson, so it would have been cities like that. Those cities would have controlled the surrounding countryside, so they would have kind of been like a tiny little country with just one city in it. Maybe with some villagers on the outside or whatever. City-states were a basic political unit of the Sumerian civilization, so most of it was built up of city-states. All of it was. So what is an empire? Well, an empire is a conglomeration of different nations that serve one person. It's many different peoples living together in one government. So the Akkadians, they were from the city of Akkad. They were in the north of the Sumerian city-states. They were considered Semitic because they spoke a Semitic language, which would be related to the Hebrew language. So there was a guy named Sargon. He was the emperor of the Akkadians, and he set up the world's first empire that we know of. So we're getting to the religious side of things. So the temple was the most important building back then. The gods were the most important people. So they would build these temples on top of a massive tower called the ziggurat, which we studied last time. We looked at that picture of them. They're kind of cool looking temple things. So they believed the gods. It was much like the Greeks, where each city was devoted to a god or a goddess, and then that city was kind of owned by the god. And the king, it initially started without even kings. Originally, it was just priests that ran the cities, and they were the conduit between God and the people. So the priests would be the controllers of the city. That was called a theocracy. There's only one modern theocracy that I can think of that exists now, and that is the Vatican. The Vatican City is its own country, so it's also one of the only city-states left in the world. And it is a theocracy because it is ruled by the Pope. Pope controls the Vatican City, so it is not a democracy like us, it is a theocracy. And that was how original city-states were created. This is a ziggurat, kind of the stepped, it's almost like a pyramid, a simple pyramid, with some steps going up it. This one's a little bit more elaborate, pretty cool looking. And you got this nice little temple right on top where you go talk to the gods. Society and religion. So there were three classes. The distinction between these classes was really important. The nobles would include the royal family, the royal officials, the priests and their families. They were all, this would also be like warriors, really, really powerful warriors would be nobles as well. And they would have different laws applied to them. They could treat commoners differently. Where a commoner would face death, a noble would maybe face whipping instead for violating a law, things like that. So they were very rigid, structured hierarchies. So then there were the commoners, and these were the people who worked for the large estates. They could be farmers, merchants, fishers, or craftspeople building things, essentially masons, stonemasons or something. And then there were slaves, people who would be captured in war or something like that. They would work on large building projects like building those ziggurats. They would do weaving cloth and kind of the menial tasks, the things that free common people didn't want to do, they would make the slaves do. The ancient beliefs. So because these rivers that were in Mesopotamia were really harsh and intense and they flooded a lot, Mesopotamians believed the world was controlled by destructive supernatural forces and gods. They believed that we were just here as playthings for the gods, and that when you died, you just went back to being mud. They thought that the gods had taken mud and created people out of it by mixing their blood with the mud, and then once the people died, the mud would just go back to being mud, and human beings would. There was no afterlife. There was no nice afterlife like the Egyptians believed, or like we believe. We is in Western civilization, I guess. Not, I shouldn't say the word we. It's a bad way to phrase it. Not a lot of us believe that. Priests were important figures politically as well as religiously. They were the ones who allowed kings to have their power, and they traced their authority back to the gods. Let's check to see how long this video is getting. It always ends up, I think it's 10 minutes, and it's been like 20. Okay, we're at 16 minutes. Okay, so, whoops. So I'm going to share these questions with you all. What geographic features made life in the Fertile Crescent possible? That was in the beginning, where we talked about the flooding of the rivers and how that allowed for more like better farming than the surrounding area. So the rivers, the surplus food allowed for the division of labor. Why is it important to have division of labor? Then you can have people building buildings and coming up with inventions and talking to the gods, doing their religious work. What role did writing play in the creating a civilization? Well, we didn't really cover that, so let's take these last couple minutes to cover that real quickly. Nothing in here. Cuneiform. So the way of writing. Oh my God, that drives me crazy. Let's get there quick. Let's go. So we got to get to cuneiform. Probably should just not even do it in this form, but whatever, we got this far. So they were important inventors. They created the wheel. So that's a big thing the division of labor allowed for, was for people to invent things. There was never a wheel before Sumeria. So they created a system of writing called the cuneiform. They used this reed stylus to make. So anyways, they would make reeds and press the shapes into clay. And when the clay would dry, boom, they were done. That's the reed stylus right there. It pretty much looks like a little pen. Scribes were the people that would write. Okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves now. So when I went right here, writing was for record keeping, teaching, and law. So they couldn't have laws, and you couldn't have a systematic law code throughout an entire empire unless you had a way to write it down. You guys have all played the game phone, I imagine. If you tell one person to tell one person who then tells another, who then tells another, eventually the original bit is different because people change it. So if you write it down, no one can change it. And if you write things down, you can teach them to your children in a better way than an oral system. You can prove it. You can keep knowledge around and build upon it. So what role did writing play in creating a civilization? It allowed for a system of laws. It allowed for a system of communication that would last beyond a lifetime. And then what is the role of government and religion in a civilization? Well, I'm gonna change this actually. So I'm gonna say, what is the role of religion in the Mesopotamian? What is the role of religion in the Mesopotamian civilization? And then that would be the priests who communicate with the gods and either rule the city or give the king legitimacy to rule the city. So anyways, I'll post the slideshow, this video, and then the questions. Take it easy, guys.